Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, the Red Raiders return to the great state, and they do so as Utah State champions, facing Saturday their biggest opportunity yet.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And new customers right now can bet only $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you once again. Welcome back to God's country, and good on you for bringing back a pair of wins. Now, following last night's event in Provo, 72-67 goes the way of the good guys. Was just an overall entertaining basketball game as you saw some lead changes and some back and forth action with BYU making some plays and Texas Tech making some plays and having to call on a few different names to make this happen and add up to this win, Chris. So we'll touch on all of them, and we'll touch on both ends of the floor, what you saw offensively and maybe even more importantly, what you saw defensively. But overall, had to feel good to wrap up that trip, do it in front of what, 17,000 plus, 18,000 Cougar fans, and quiet a big home crowd.
Toughest team wins. I mean, and that's what it was. This was a physical Big 12 basketball game from, buzzer to buzzer. I mean, it was that game worried me. I mean, BYU is extremely talented. They are very young. I think that obviously with the new coach, but they are going to cause teams some problems as they go. But you're kind of starting to figure it out a little bit, and it's just amazing how different life feels and your outlook on this team feels compared to when you're walking out of the building on New Year's Eve to now. It's just sports, man. You just never know how this thing's going to go. But I mean, the UCF game is a big reason why you went and won these two, in my opinion. Grant, that loss bothered the head coach a great deal. I think he was frustrated, and I don't know if the right word is embarrassed, and he's continued to point the finger at himself for maybe not having his guys ready to go out of the gate mentally or with that edge. And boy, they sure had it on that trip to Utah. And from the head coach to the assistants to players, and I think anytime that he
radio guys,
anytime that he didn't like what he was seeing, especially on the defensive end, because this is what he said after the UCF game. It's my fault for allowing some things to go on and letting guys try to play through it. But if you make a mistake on defense, you're coming out. And it didn't matter who it was in this trip. He was sitting guys down left and right for lapses or mistakes on defense. But anyway, bottom line is you come home and you're 2-1 in the league, and your net ranking is pretty solid. Your KenPom ranking, all the analytics stuff that everybody's looking at, the way you're playing the game, it's pretty impressive. So a fun state of Utah champs, man. I wasn't sure what to expect, man, but a 2-game road trip and you get them both, that's tough to get done in this league. I don't care who it is, new members or not.
That's going down smooth every time. And, considering these being two new members, even though their entry points were at different points, you also saw in BYU what I think is immediately turned into one of the better environments in the Big 12 Conference. So obviously tough to do. Utah's got a long way to go, both on the floor and maybe in the seats as well. But on the road, anywhere in the Big 12 Conference, tough to get a win. And you get two of them, and you're coming back home to your biggest resume building opportunity so far with the Cyclones coming to your house. So setting up really nicely for what should be an exciting Saturday coming up.
Yeah, BYU. But by the way, BYU is it's a fascinating place. It is. Every time both my trips up there, it's so interesting. There's all the Mormon aspect and everything, but there's a major international. Like, you look at this basketball roster, it's Russia, it's Mongolia, they're all over the place as far as the pronunciation guide. I'm like, I'm gonna need a timeout and take some time to learn all these names and everything. A lot of their coaches are have foreign ties and everything, and then obviously you have the NBA coach, but then you get in that crowd and it's like, okay, they've had these kids all cooped up for however many hours, and they let them out for these games. I'm joking, and they feed them a bunch of sugar, and they're just really loud, and it's crazy. You got Cosmo the Cougar bouncing around everywhere and doing all his stunts, but it's a wild environment, man, and it's been that way both football and basketball. And I agree with you that in both cases, it's one of the best environments there is in the league now, regardless of sport. But yeah, after you get these done, it's like now you got the Cyclones staring at you in the face. Oh yeah, it'll get easier, or maybe you can come home and get right. But we got a few hours and days to marinate before we have to buckle up for TJ Otzelberger's team, because I do think they are the best team in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. They may be the best team in the country. They have the one loss to Auburn, who has potentially been the top team in the country at various times, and they have a loss to them by a bucket. But we'll talk about them maybe in another show. But I'll tell you, man, I think that your team is kind of changing a bit here, and I don't know if it's this Utah trip or if it's just what's happening, but it's kind of been interesting to watch, and it starts with the point guard.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's get into some of these individual efforts, and one of the biggest changes that we've seen so far. First, today's episode brought to you by Rocket Money. And if you're lost in the subscription whirlwind, listen up. If you're like me, you've had a few subscriptions you didn't even realize you were still paying on. And that's where Rocket Money comes in, making it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and even helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit in 2025. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, the subscription tracker is a must-have. Cancel services you're not using anymore and save a ton. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Just go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. One of the biggest changes that we've seen so far starts up front with Elijah Hawkins. And, I know obviously the hot shooting is what really stands out. He's got a career high in three-pointers made in Provo. He led the team in scoring with 22 points, but also 5 assists, no turnovers on the day for Hawkins. So what he's done offensively can't be ignored, and it may just very well be the biggest part of his kind of transformation over the last few games. But I'm wondering what else you see from him, Chris, because I also thought, and I want to circle back to this team's defensive efforts recently as a whole in just a moment, but Hawkins' intensity on the defensive end of the floor, I think, is something to notice as well. And it's really, that may not be a change, because I actually think he's had some of that early on in the season in our first few looks at him. But what does the picture look like for Elijah Hawkins that you think is really having him sort of evolve into this impact guy he's become for Texas Tech? Who knows how long it'll last, but we're enjoying it right now.
Well, I just looking it up to be sure, but he's shooting basically 60% from three in league games. That's pretty good. That dog will hunt, and it will hunt well. I love his fight, and I'm starting to see a lot of his maturity. And let's just look at this 2-game capsule here in the state of Utah, what he did against Utah and BYU, because I think he was large in part the catalyst in both games. And yeah, there was other pieces that came along, especially Darion Williams at the end of the game against BYU. But Elijah Hawkins, he's in these 2 games, he averaged 17 points a game, 6.5 assists. He played 33.5 minutes a game on average. He turned the ball over once. And I mean, and then the 3-point shooting, he was 10 of 15. And he's going to continue to get looks because there's so many other good shooters. And you start zipping that ball around, and I think teams are going to say, I said this to you back before the season started, that one of my concerns was that I think that everybody's going to say, hey, we're not leaving this guy or this guy. We're going to make this point guard of yours beat us scoring the ball. Guess what? He's doing it. He's tipping his cap and be like, okay, continue to give me open looks, and I'm going to bury them. He's shooting 40% on the season, but 60% in these 3 league games. But it is what we're starting to see, it's his ability to play the pick and roll. It's elite. And Christian Anderson will show you some flashes, and it's just fascinating, that young fella, because you see some potential greatness there. Then you'll see some freshmen too. But Elijah Hawkins just has an understanding of, I mean, if somebody looks the wrong way, he knows exactly what to do. And he's setting up his big guys and just not making mistakes with the basketball. And the assist to turnover ratio, I mean, you have, let me see here. You have 13 assists to 1 turnover in these 2 games. I mean, that's just big time when you've got the ball in your hands as much as he does.
Yeah.
And then you're a threat on the other end too. And he's not really been a liability or any way on defense. And it's just been fun to kind of watch him flourish and figure it out. But he's a veteran and he's playing like it. And I think this is what they acquired when they went to go get him and targeted him and bringing him in. It's taken a bit, because it's not too long ago to where you were looking back early in the season and it's Christian Anderson that's on the floor finishing these games and these tight ones. And Elijah Hawkins is sitting over there on the bench.
Yep.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Let's get to a guy you've already mentioned in Darion Williams and what we saw from him in the crunch time stages of the game. It was obviously fun to watch his takeover, and I thought it was fun to watch Texas Tech offensively really kind of continue to work to try and get some defensive switches to get the matchup they wanted. And then when that came to pass, you knew where Darion was going, and it was toward the basket. And there were a couple of different finishes that he showed us, but that was specifically what the doctor ordered in crunch time, to have your foundation piece, which is the way I view him, the cornerstone, really come alive and just get down there and get automatic for a little bit. I know it hadn't been easy for him over these last few games to open up Big 12 play, but as with the team overall, this road trip has shown us some stuff, and reminded us of some stuff that old D5 is capable of. I'll just put it that way. And man, it's fun to watch.
This is what an all Big 12 player looks like.
Yeah.
You know, that's the simplest way to put it. I mean, in these 2 games, he averaged 18, 6, 6, and 2. I mean, it's just, he's a Swiss Army knife. Like, what does the game call for? And this is what I'll give you. And he can be the passer and beat you. He can be the scorer and beat you. I mean, BYU, they're doubling him, tripling him, and he's still going to work and then telling them about it. I just love the way he's wired right now. And we're watching him graduate into a new role here, because this was not his role last year. You know, he wasn't asked to do what he just did against BYU at the end of the game at any point last year. And I think last year, a lot of what he did was from deep. That's what, but the 3-point shot isn't really a huge part of what we're seeing here. It's just him going to work on the block. Him, obviously with the assists, and he's still rebounding at a high level, and he's upped it on defense, and it's just fun to watch him, because he closed that game. Yeah. Elijah Hawkins, I think, in many ways got you to that point, but then as they were playing some zone defense and doing some different things, I mean, it was Darion Williams that closed it, and just all there is to it. And he is just, I don't know, it was a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, no doubt.
Double, triple team, doesn't matter. I'm getting mine, and I'm going to say somebody in the front row, and it's just the way we go. And the referee's like, "Hey, man, don't do that." And he's like, I got you. And then he'd do it again. I was here for it, all of
it. Man, we've also got a shout out, and this is the perfect person to do this with as we begin to get into the defensive aspect of the conversation. Chance McMillan, your other scorer that was in double digits for you against BYU, and once again doing work on the glass. I think 7 or 8 rebounds. I feel like I mention that every time we're talking about McMillan, which because of his size, I think is what makes it so impressive, because he's not the biggest guy out there, but he competes, and he can get up. He's got some athleticism, but seems to always be making an impact as far as rebounding is concerned. He did that again, but there were some things standing out once again. I felt like defensively for McMillan. I know you noticed that as well, and that's what kind of led the charge, I guess, on that end, right?
Okay, yeah, because to your point, he had 8 boards in one of these games and 6 in the other. I think it was 8 boards versus BYU, and you don't want to gloss over that. But okay, for all the chatter that you've heard about defense, and Grant's been one that's pointed that out as much as anybody about his own team, and we've got to get better. And again, they will struggle at times, and plus there's some elite level talent and coaching and offense in this league too. So you don't want to ever forget that, because you're about to see more of that on Saturday and then next Tuesday night. I mean, just on and on it goes. But you are seeing improvements on defense. And I think that it's important to note that Chance McMillan, I don't want to say he's led the charge, but we would be crazy if you don't mention him, because for all the issues you maybe had in the first half against against Utah in that first half, when it just like you couldn't get them stopped, and obviously BYU had some moments too, Chance McMillan has largely shut down the opposing team's best scorer in back-to-back games. I mean, the Matson kid was averaging, I think, 17 a game. He's the second leading scorer in the Big 12. He ends up with 0 field goals and 4 points, all on free throws in that game. That's it. That's all I'm giving you today. Richie Saunders ends up with, I think, 6 points, and he was 2 of 4, and he comes into the game averaging 16 and a half a game. And so, I mean, that's just big time. And that you can look at a lot of different things, but you've got to focus on Chance is taking on that task, almost maybe where it's maybe hurt him at some level on offense, but he's doing a lot of the dirty work, man. And you mentioned the rebounding, but I want to highlight his defense. And he's still scoring in double digits in both of these games, and he's still making some plays. He's playing a ton of minutes. I don't know, man. I think that you got a couple of kids here that are in their second year on your team, and they're just flourishing under this staff. And Grant has squeezed everything he can out of these two. And I don't know, it's a lot of fun, because they're, again, like Darion, Chance is having to graduate into a new role and like more of a primary role than he did before. It's not as complimentary as it was last year. And I don't know, man. I think but I want to make sure that people understand, for all your issues, the leading scorer in these last couple games, not tonight when Chance is on the watch.
I know we're highlighting him individually, but it does kind of sound like you do feel like you're seeing as a team a trend in a positive direction. Is there something noticeably different, or what do you think is playing out on the defensive end?
First of all, when you start this game last night, Grant it's just noticeable. Like his energy, his competitiveness. I mean, all of it. I'm sure you saw it on TV.
He was amped, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's trying to set a tone. And I think his team is feeding off of that, because he will tell you it's not going to be maybe the most talented team that wins this league. It's not going to be even the most well-coached team that wins this league. It's going to be who can bring it every night. And that's the trick. And it's hard to get that done. Young people, and they've got stuff going, and you've got travel, and you've got timing of game, whatever it may be, but who can show up every night? And I think he's trying to squeeze that out of his guys. And I think that they didn't do that when UCF showed up, and it frustrated him. For him to see UCF lose to Kansas by 50 in Orlando, I think really and so I think that
us too.
Yes, and I think that he's getting his guys to play really hard. There's just to answer your question, I think there's a sense of urgency there that I think he has talked about, and we're seeing it play out. And if somebody doesn't have it or they make a mistake via the scouting report, they come out. And I think he's just pushing those buttons maybe a bit quicker. And we need to mention this too. Like, I think Kerwin played really well versus Utah. Defensively, he knocked down a couple threes, but it was defensively he was there. Against BYU, it wasn't working. He didn't play a ton of minutes at all. And I don't know if it was necessarily defensive lapses, but I think it's interesting to watch this whole JT Toppin thing. He was not much of and I think this is great for your team. He wasn't much of a factor in either one of these two games. He had 11 and 5, I think, against Utah, and then against BYU, he had zero rebounds and just 5 points, and he was kind of a non-factor. And it was Federico that was on the floor for the tail end of that game as you tried to go win it. And these are positives. This isn't a negative, like, what's wrong with JT? No, this is you figuring out different ways to win and different guys that can do it, and it increases your margin for error. But it's just been kind of fascinating seeing some of the personnel. This is the beauty of a basketball season. We talk about this when it starts in November. What's it going to look like in December? Then now we're starting to see, okay, what's it look like a week into January? Because it's very different than it was a month ago and certainly 2 months ago.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Always goes down smooth when it happens like it has over the last 2 games. And looking to keep the good times going Saturday as Iowa State comes to town. Chris, glad you made it back safe. You've been freed from the shackles of the state of Utah, and we're back to enjoying the vibes at United Supermarkets Arena. So I'm sure we'll be back around to get the table set for that one, man. Appreciate the time as always, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, and speaking of Saturday, it will be you're about to play back-to-back Saturday home games that are 2 of the bigger games that you will play all year. And remember that big disappointing Arizona team? Not anymore. they're 3-0, and they're like, yeah, hey, don't forget we're Arizona, and they're starting to figure it out too. So that's who you got back-to-back home games. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun at the arena the next 2 Saturday afternoons, and but we'll talk about it next time. So I appreciate it. I'm glad to be back in my lovely state of Texas. I missed you. Yes, I missed you, and hope to stay a bit.
Texas missed you as well. All right, appreciate all of you for being out there. As always, shout out to the everydayers. Thanks for letting us count on you to be out there, every day. And shout out to the Matador Mob as well. Stayed up a little bit too late last night following the game. The adrenaline's pumping, and was texting with a couple of Matador mobsters about what we had just seen. And my head was already on the pillow, to be honest with you. I think my wife's getting a little suspicious. I'm like texting late night now all of a sudden with people from the internet. That's the way she understands it, at least. But she doesn't know what it's all about. We do. It's a one-on-one direct connection with text straight to your phone. So if you're interested in such pillow talk, hit the show notes and check out the link for a free 14-day trial to become a Matador Mob insider. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.